As Dionysus and his entourage gathered new members for their Indian adventure, the Olympian gods were watching them closely. Then Zeus's voice rang out like thunder, with a command addressed to his son Hephaestus.
My noble son and craftsman god, fashion for Dionysus weapons befitting his divinity. His journey will be long and his enemies many. May he be outfitted not only with the strength flowing through his veins, but with symbols of his power. May India and the world acknowledge his glory.
The Master of Flames, Hephaestus, bowed before the will of the Supreme Father. Visions of all the creations he would make were already brewing in his mind. He headed down to his workshop in the volcanic depths of Mount Etna, where fire burned eternally, sustained by the entrails of the earth, only interrupted by the groans of the monster Typhon. Hephaestus set to work in the divine workshop with exceptional commitment. He gathered rare metals, the gold of dawn, the bronze of midnight, and the silver seized from Selene's moonbeams. Upon the divine anvil, he cast shapes and ornaments that expressed Dionysus's very essence. First, Hephaestus shaped a new sacred thyrsus, the sacred staff that would be Dionysus's most iconic weapon. With cypress wood and gleaming gold, he wrapped it with living vines which seemed to grow and curl around the staff. He fitted a pine spire at the end, polished until it gleamed like a star, imbued with a power that could summon nature in its wildest and most unbridled form. Hephaestus then fashioned an armor suitable for a god. The breastplate was pure gold, with embossed vines and braided ivy leaves. Satyrs were dancing and nymphs laughing in scenes which seemed to come to life under the glare of the flames. Hephaestus used silver for the helmet and carved a pair of tiny goat horns, a symbol of Dionysus's connection with nature and wild animals. The greaves and shield rounded off the outfit. Having worked non-stop for days, Hephaestus finally completed the weapons. He admired his creations, bearing the weight of the symbolism and power behind each piece. Dionysus reverently accepted the gifts, his eyes shining when he beheld the thyrsus and felt the living energy flowing from it. With these weapons, I shall not only march to war, but spread my essence, spreading cheer and transformation to the ends of the earth. With Hephaestus's gifts, Dionysus took another step towards his destiny, while the world stood waiting for the impact of his increasing glory. Dionysus was under the constant spiteful eyes of Hera, who covertly cursed at the sight of her rival being extolled by the other gods.
Those sacred weapons forged for a bastard. They have forgotten that Dionysus is a symbol of chaos, a god who merges celebration and destruction. Now they dare to fit him for war? Such fools are these gods who praise his rise, blind to the danger he poses.
Nevertheless, Hera knew she could not act directly against him at that moment. Fate was protecting him, and Zeus had his eyes on his beloved son. However, Hera, shrewd as ever, started to make plans.
If I cannot stop him now, may he be defeated on his journey. Let his glory turn to shame and his legacy become ashes like his wretched mother.
Dionysus and his entourage were holding a celebration to receive the weapons and armor made by the god of forges to equip his followers. The Bacchantes, the satyrs and their faithful adherents, were now also ready for war. The night was swept by singing and dancing. The satyrs chanted joyful songs around burning bonfires. The nymphs twirled in graceful patterns, and the mortals toasted with the first sip of the fresh wine that Dionysus had offered them. The stars appeared to move in swirling motifs that offered visions of the coming campaign. Images of victory appeared among the constellations, Dionysus leading his army against enemy hordes, wreathed in ivy leaves and standing in triumph over distant mountains. But the omens also carried warnings. A momentary eclipse darkened the moon, and shadows emerged from the torchlight, dancing in threatening ways. Those who were attentive understood that the journey would be riddled with challenges and sacrifices. Even if Dionysus's destiny had glory written all over it. As the celebrations concluded and the first sunbeams brightened the skies, Dionysus's army was ready to set off. Leading the way, the god himself, in his new golden armor and holding the thyrsus as a banner, led the entourage. The satyrs followed, their horns and hooves rhythmically beating the ground. The nymphs, decorated with flowers and leaves, carried wine jars, ready to share the god's merriment with those they met along the way. Human followers, including warriors and dancers, rounded off the procession, their songs echoing off the mountains. The march was a remarkable blend of celebration and military intent. The musical instruments rang out, and the songs enlivened even the most jaded. Each step the army took felt like it was charged with a divine vibration, as if the ground itself were reacting to the god's presence. The fields and forests through which they traveled were touched by Dionysus's energy. Vines sprouted spontaneously along the path, their ripe fruit drooping like a sign of abundance. As Dionysus moved forward with his vibrant throng, the gusts of his march reached India. King Deriades was informed in Pataliputra, the grandiose capital, of the foreign god who was marching with his troop of satyrs, nymphs, and mortals on a campaign that threatened to change lands and traditions. A descendant of the river gods and protector of Indian traditions, Deriades was a towering and adamant figure. Son of the river god Hephaestus and the nymph Astris, he embodied the power and strength of the waters running through Indian lands. His body was as strong as mountains, his eyes shone like the sun's reflection on a roaring river, and his voice bore the weight of thunder. Deriades was not merely a warrior king. He stood as a symbol of his land's cultural resistance to foreign influences. As far as he was concerned, Dionysus was not just an invader, but an insult to the traditions and sovereignty of the Indian deities. A god of wine and celebrations. What does he know about discipline and honor? About the strength of the waters that mold these lands? We will not bow to a foreigner who dances while others toil. Deriades called together his generals, warriors, and even supernatural allies. He vowed to defend India with all his force, turning the Ganges and other sacred rivers into natural barriers against Dionysus's progress. He also looked for support from the local deities, who, torn between fear and pride, seemed reluctant to welcome a new deity who threatened to upset the balance of power. Omens started to appear at Deriades' court. Reports told of vines growing where the army of Dionysus had passed, and of wine's transformative power to break down cultural and emotional boundaries. Anyone who had previously challenged Deriades saw him as an impenetrable mountain to climb, a wall that no divine or mortal power could topple easily. The clash between Dionysus and Deriades was therefore outlined as a clash of civilizations, a struggle between transformation and preservation, celebration and resistance. With his joyful spirit and divine power, Dionysus challenged Deriades, the symbol of a highly ingrained culture. As Dionysus prepared to take over, Deriades took up arms to protect. The field was ready, and the war drums began to echo. Confrontation was inevitable.